I want to play a little. Bobby Chacon went on Angonet Leave. I think it was last night. He speaks about this, and it's funny. Cops and people in law enforcement, we speak and think the same because he said right away, I see it very Spartan. That was the first word I said, Mike, wasn't it? When we talked about Kohberger's
that's the word. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. So here's Bobby Chacon.
Talk about these new photos that we're seeing inside of Bryan Kohberger's apartment. I want to bring in Bobby Chacon. He's a retired FBI agent, also an attorney. Bobby, thanks so much for coming on. What strikes you first when you look through these photos of Bryan Kohberger's apartment?
Well, I think how Spartan it was, how little personality, if you will, was. I mean, there was a few maybe kind of birthday cards or greeting cards, but very few. Nothing on the walls, which, you know, on one hand, I know that, you know, I've lived the undergraduate life in a dorm, and he was in graduate student housing, which, you know, is always a little, you know, lower end. It usually comes furnished with cheap furniture and not a lot, you know, in way of aesthetics. But a lot of times you personalize it yourself, you know, even a little house plant or something. And this was nothing. It was nothing there. Now, granted, these pictures are taken, you know, he had time to kind of clean out things and get rid of things. And, but I was really struck by like just how sparse it was, how, you know, there was nothing personal. There just seemed to be no personality. You know, we know now about the personality type and stuff, and it just seemed to fit this person who like didn't have any friends, didn't have any social life. There was just nothing there. It was just books, which were used in his studies, you know, and maybe one or two greeting cards, one from his mom, maybe, but that's it. It was very, very sparse.
Yeah, very, very sparse. I mean, not a photograph of anybody. For as close as he was, apparently, you know, we know from talking to Celebrate digital experts, they examined his phone. His mother and father were his two main points of contact in his life. He started his day talking to them. He texted them throughout the day. They tucked him in at night, basically via phone. Not even a photo of mom and dad, you know, anywhere, siblings, anything. Nothing personal at all. You know, I think that his attorneys would say, well, you know, he has level 1 autism. Maybe it's a function of that. I would say this is somebody who lived in his own head based on what we know. He lived a fantasy life in his own head, fantasizing about what he was going to do based on what we know from his Google searches about non-consensual pornography, the dressing up like this Ted Bundy-esque character, I guess, from this show he watched on YouTube. I mean, wouldn't you say that's probably a little more accurate?
Yeah, the only photograph that I saw that kind of looked kind of lived in, if you know that kind of term, like was his desk with his computer and his bed right next to it. It wasn't even a very fancy bed or anything. It was just like he lived his life looking at that computer and then going to bed. Like it was the only area of the house that, I'm not going to say it looked normal, but it looked like somebody lived there. The rest of it, that place could have been abandoned months ago. It didn't look like anybody lived there in months.
So watching this, and Mike, we spoke about this the other night. Phil, what do you think this says about him? The decor in his apartment, or does it say nothing?
Oh, I think it says a lot, because now I didn't go to college, but I'm thinking back to when I was single and I had my first apartment, and there were telltale signs of what was going on with my friends. His birthday had just passed, so maybe a friend or a girlfriend got a card or balloons. None of that was there. I mean, we did a lot of drinking in them days when I was single, so there was no signs of any of that, of partying. So I think what we saw a profile of exactly what was going on in his life, which wasn't very much. He was kind of secluded. He was introverted. And I think that Bobby Chacon kind of pointed out that it seems like the only point of life in that apartment was that computer, that he lived on that computer, probably doing searches and research for his criminology courses and all of that. And then there's a lot of things that are missing from his cell phone and his computer that were wiped out. Perhaps it could be some of the trail of the victims in this case, you know, the stalking of them. So there's a lot of different things that we can allude to, but I think that apartment, the way that it's laid out, I think that's kind of a profile of exactly what was going on in his life. There were no signs of life in that apartment. I mean, when I had my apartment, my friends would come over, we would do our pre-drinking at the apartment. It doesn't appear that any of that was going on in his life. So again, my apartment, I made my bed every day. I always had a neat bed, and it wasn't really decorated like you said, Bill, earlier, but it was kind of simple. But you have to think about what the mindset is of a 20-something-year-old person that's a graduate student in college.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, it does show, and I will say, for as much as I want to joke about my own decorating tastes, that resemble a hotel room, but there's not a single. Now, he was planning on returning. You would think that if there might be a picture of his girlfriend there somewhere, a picture of him with his buddy playing football, sitting there somewhere, a picture of his mom and dad, and maybe his two sisters, just something to remind yourself of your family. He's about 2,500 miles away on the opposite coast, 3 different time zones. And you'd think you'd like to have just something, maybe not a poster on the wall, but just some pictures to remind you, here's my family, I love my family, and I miss my family, and just something. But yeah, the fact that, and Phil pointed out, the fact that there's absolutely not a single thing that looks like it was purchased or made or has any sort of personality to it is a little bit frightening. It is a little bit off-putting. And I think, Phil, you're right. All he did, maybe with his OCD, I don't know, but all he did was be on the computer and think about stuff and write stuff. And he was living in, Angela Levy said it right, living in his head. That's where he was. He probably, from the time he got there, and there was maybe 1 or 2 times where he maybe went out to a social. I think there was a pool party at one point thrown by somebody. After that, he probably did not go to a bar and have a beer and listen to some good music. He probably didn't go watch a football game at a bar. We know he probably didn't go on any dates. He didn't go maybe drink on a Friday night with a couple of the other PhD students, because you tend to form a small little clique of people and help each other mutually trying to get through that program. No, that does show that he really was only in his head, and he blocked out the rest of the outside world.
Some of the things, and I know that Phil and Mike, you were both on the show, or maybe it was actually, we had 2 shows about this motive being a psychosexual attack. Mm-hmm. And the first guest we had was Dr. Joni Johnston, a forensic psychologist from the West Coast. And look, none of us, myself, Phil, or Mike, are experts on the psychological end of this, but we've seen enough to recognize it. And Dr. Joni, she definitely gave her rubber stamp of approval that she felt we were on the right track, that this was, yes, in fact, a psychosexual murder. And I don't know him well. I've seen him on other shows, and I have a lot of respect for him. Dr. Gary Brancato, who's on the Interview Room a lot, he did a show, and we never watched it, but apparently on that same exact topic, that this was a psychosexual murder. And then we had retired FBI agent Jim Clemente, who was the chief writer for the Criminal Minds TV show, as well as being an attorney and one of the best profilers the FBI has ever had.